In this presentation, I offer my seminal view of an African philosophy of higher education. According to my thoughts on what constitutes an African philosophy of higher education, is that such a view is underscored or constituted by a notion of cosmopolitan Ubuntu. Now, Cosmo Ubuntu is an African practice whereby humans recognize one another's commonalities and differences, whether implicitly or explicitly, and concurrently accentuate the importance of recognizing one another's practices and preparedness to live together. Considering that the recognition of human practices in relation to their varying contexts is intertwined with what is internally and externally linked to such practices, the notion of cosmopolitanism comes into play, since cosmopolitanism is linked to human encounters that are underscored by cooperative, coexistential, and oppositional acts. Now, such a view of cosmopolitan Ubuntu affirms the positive value of difference, anti-racism, openness to others, and hospitality. Put differently, of course, cosmopolitan Ubuntu is an African ethic that requires humans to be open and embrace the risks that will allow them to extend themselves beyond being what it means to be human. In this way, cosmopolitan Ubuntu or Cosmo Ubuntu seems to be underscored and guided by human actions bound together by notions of openness, reflexivity, responsibility, dissonance, and the recognition that humans have the potential to connect with all other humans, irrespective of their disagreements and modes of descent. So, an African philosophy of higher education constituted by Cosmo Ubuntu provokes people to see things differently from the vantage point of others. And when people see things different, or rather see things in alternate ways, there's always the possibility for productive dissent and difference. My understanding of what constitutes Cosmo Ubuntu, which I consider as the guiding principle of an African philosophy of higher education. And this means without Cosmo Ubuntu, without thinking of Cosmo Ubuntu, which is really a combination between Ubuntu, the dignity of the self towards others and the self, and cooperative engagement among selves and others, that notion of Ubuntu in relation to others and otherness, which I refer to as Cosmo Ubuntu, seems to be the guiding principle of what makes up a notion of African philosophy of higher education. And without such an idea of Cosmo Ubuntu, an African philosophy of higher education will cease to exist. Thank you.